Well, alrighty, gang, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am yet again your host, Mike Bulliver, and I remain your favorite former Fed. Say it with me.
Download the ASP Unlimited app for all the content you love from Active Self-Protection and more with no interference from YouTube. No ads, no age gates, exclusive videos, seminars, classes, and more on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Hit the link in the description or download ASP Unlimited from your app store today.
Favorite former Fed with me today is a new friend of mine. His name is Dan. Dan is from Southern New Hampshire. I think we had a Mainer recently, so we're trying to get all 50 states. I need to put a map behind me and put little pins,
little pins.
Where I've had guests from. I love that idea. He is a traveling mechanic. I'll let him explain that to you here in a moment. And he is in what he assures me is a solid relationship with his girlfriend. So, ladies, back off. Dan has spoken for. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, fun fact: my oldest living brother, named after my dad, Edward Williver Jr., was a mechanic for years, an auto mechanic. So I know a little bit about what that life is like. Maybe not a traveling one, but I know, for example, I see you're wearing a Mac Tools T-shirt. I understand the struggle of having to buy that one tool that you'll use one time on an 87 Volvo wagon and never be able to use it again because it's that specific. Is that the case? Are the tools still your arch enemy in this business?
Not so much. So I bounced around from shop to shop for a little bit, and then I finally landed at a place where I was doing lifted trucks, muscle cars, a little bit of light general repair, stuff like that. And had a falling out there and decided that maybe something more, heavy duty related would be the best case. So I went and worked at a DPW barn. That didn't work out. Now, for 2 years now, I'm working on golf cars, and that's actually been really fun.
So golf carts, like you would see on a golf course.
Yeah.
Oh, so you go from place to place that has those, and you square their carts away for them.
Not even store them away. So I'll show up to a course that's got 90 cars, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, those 6 over there, they don't run. They got flat tires. Fix them up, do that," and then I get sent into the city a lot, and so when I go there, it's a lot of utility cars. We call them carry-alls because work for Club Car, but so those are, when we go there, it's a lot of front end damage and kind of weird problems with that. But I do a lot of stuff in the city. We call it commercial retail. So I do a lot of commercial retail stuff. But they got me doing a few stops that are at golf courses.
Well, I like the traveling aspect of it because you're not always going to the same place every day, which for me was one of the reasons I got into law enforcement, because I didn't want to be going to the same, nothing wrong with that if that's what you like doing, but going to the same office every day, day in, day out, sitting in the same place, looking at the same people all the time didn't appeal to me. So I'd imagine that's a nice aspect of that, is you're not always going to the same spot every day, right?
Yeah, no, not really. Sometimes we got to follow up and we got to go back there the next day or the day after, but on all of our contracted stops, it'll be I think the shortest amount of time we do is a 1 week interval. And so I could go up to, Newport Country Club 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, I'll do it again. And then again. And then if they had 10 cars down, I was only able to fix 6. I go back, the next week after just to do those remaining 4, and then onward from there.
Very cool. All right, so talk to us about your personal history with sort of self-defense. Now, we talked a little bit before we started, because you weren't, as so many people aren't, you weren't sure that your story was, worth an episode. I think that it will be. Well, people will know when they hear this come out on the podcast one of these days. But you did mention that you were armed at the time that this thing happened. So have you been sort of interested in self-defense or self-defense minded for a while now?
Yeah. I grew up hunting, doing all my grandfather take me out bird hunting. My father took me out deer hunting. So I'm no stranger to firearms. Shot a couple pistols here and there, a couple handguns, but I didn't really start to get into it until last year when I found your guys' YouTube channel and podcast. And then it was the year before that. So 2 years ago, being a former Massachusetts resident, I had to go out and get the LTC, do the do the police station interview, the test, do all that. So I got that a couple years ago, found your guys' channel shortly after. And then, or 2 years ago, found your guys' channel last year and moved from Massachusetts to Southern New Hampshire the end of last June, and just trying to equal out everything. I haven't really had the time to go out and get proper training. There's a few places around that do training courses, and I think there's a couple advanced courses that one place does, but I think for the most part it's mainly just basic stuff. What that would include, I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet, but yeah. No, long story short, yeah, no stranger to firearms, but yeah, definitely interested more, getting more training.
So do you mind, I know people like to know when I think to ask, do you mind telling us what your everyday carry is, what your setup is?
Yeah, so it's actually, it's the only handgun that I've personally bought. It is a Shield, M&P Shield 9. I think it's like the 3.1 inch barrel, just a kind of smaller one.
Is it Shield Plus by any chance, or no? You don't know?
No, it's not the Shield Plus. It's just a single stack. It's the older.
Those are fine. Those are fine little guns. Like obviously we're a brand ambassador for HK. We love everyone to get HKs, but not everybody wants to or can't afford it or whatever. The Shield's a great little gun. I think I gave the one I got to my son, and he uses that for his sort of every day. He has an Enigma holster for it, and it fits in there nicely. So it's a good little setup. Do you run a dot by any chance, or iron sights?
No, iron sights. I was able to pick up a set of True Glow, kind of the fluorescent lights, the iron sights for it. But being a studio apartment, I don't really have a vice out in the garage that I can go and swap those out with yet. So still waiting to find a suitable place to do that.
Very cool. All right, so let's talk about your incident. And again, Dan wasn't sure this would qualify. I think that it does for any number of reasons. But what it basically involves is being seated in a vehicle and something's going on in your periphery that you don't love. And what should you have thought? I'm not talking about Dan, you, the listener, you, the viewer, what should you think about in advance of that possibly being a thing? You're armed, you're sitting there, and something's going on around you. What are some of the considerations in that situation? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. So just kind of walk us through, how long ago was it? Where were you? What were you doing? And what happened?
Last fall, it was cold out. I'd probably say it was probably late October, I think. I was going down to visit friends and family down close to, where I moved from. And, one of my buddies who I'd helped build a truck, an old square body Chevy for, he hit me up while I was down here, and he was like, "Hey, can you come over in the morning and can you help me finish up a couple things?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, no problem. I haven't seen you in a few months. It'd be nice to catch up."
Sure.
So I headed over. I can't remember exactly what time I got there. If I were to guess, it was probably about 9 o'clock in the morning. The way that his property is kind of set up, there's a single car garage kind of on the side, and then there's a 2-car garage probably 10 or 15 yards behind it, and then the man door, the left side of the building, kind of jaunts behind that single car garage, and then there's the garden behind that, and behind the single car garage and behind that garden and the garage, there's about a 10-foot gap between the end of the garden and that building.
Okay.
And there's an empty lot next door. So what I normally do all the time, I've been over there hundreds of times, is I pull in through the empty lot and I kind of park along the garden. And so I was probably sitting there for 20 minutes. He was doing a side job, so he was like, "Oh, I'll be there soon." He's like, "Let yourself in." I couldn't remember his passcode, so I was like, "Oh, it's cold out. I'll just sit in the truck." So sitting there, and it's like, looking back on it, it's like the forbidden, like the ASP forbidden laws. But I was sitting in the truck, scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, listening to music, and I don't really know why something told me to look up, but I just looked up and to my right, and I see this guy walking in front of that 2-car garage, kind of heading right to left, like he's going to cut in between the garden and the building, and behind my truck. So I kind of looked up, saw him, and I looked back down, and I did a double take because I realized like he was reaching into his coat. So